Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We will start our webinar soon, and before we start, everyone is suggested to turn on the camera to make the program more impressive. First of all, I want to say a very good evening and happy Ramadan to one and all gathered here. While we are waiting for people to come in, we will start our webinar. On this auspicious occasion, I would like to welcome you all to our webinar program, the Sustainable Development Goal 7, Affordable and Clean Energy and Disability Inclusion. I'm Nur Aini Islami and my friend Mapping as a moderator, so happy to see you together here. A big thanks to each and every one of you for your presence here for joining our webinar. We heartily welcome our dear lecturers for joining our webinar. We also want to thank our university friends. I hope webinar will be great and successful, and I hope you will enjoy the program. Have a great time and thank you everyone for joining us.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Happy Ramadan, everyone. I'm Mapping. I really hope your guests are having high energy to join in our webinars.
Because we are now with our special guest. Dun 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 dun. Stars shine at night, some stars shine in bright daylight. It is our pleasure to welcome our such star, Ms. Fitri Ardiansah, the honorable chief guest of today's functions. He is an Indonesia country director at IDH, the Suitable Trend Intuited. He has more than 18 years of working experience in the field of ecological and environmental economics, natural resource management, integrated spatial and land use planning, sustainable community, sustainable fraud management, as well as climate change and energy.
He is also a board member of Partnership for Indonesia's Sustainable Agriculture, a regional committee member for Tropical Forest Alliance 2020 or World Economic Forum in Southeast Asia, a council member of Sawit Challenge, a committee member of the Development of National Competency Standard of Sustainable Coffee, and a core group member of International Union for Conservation of Nature's Commission on Ecosystem Management. So his name is Mr. Fitri Ardiansah. Let us join to welcome him on aboard.
Thank you, Annie. Let's join to return to Mr. Fitri. Hello, Mr. Fitri. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. I'm good. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Mr.
Yeah. We hope that you have a great fresh start Ramadan. And are you first to collaboration with IUM students?
This is the first one. Yeah, this is the first time. I've heard about the university, but truly, I mean, usually I have that kind of experience or working relations with other universities in Malaysia, but with International Islamic University of Malaysia, this is the first one. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Wow,
it is our pleasure.
Yeah, it is our pleasure to have a conversation with you. All right. After this, Sister Annie will continue to open the interview question sessions, and later on, the audience can start to ask any question either through the box chat or face-to-face.
Thank you, Mapping. And again, we are very grateful to Mr. Fitrian for giving us the opportunity to be with us in the middle of your busy life. So previously, as an expert, of course, that you know about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, number 7, which is affordable and clean energy. Yeah. However, it is estimated that 15% of the global population, around 1 billion people, live with some form of disability. but due to the likelihood of underreporting, this figure could be considerably higher. So, people with disabilities are known to face a lot of problems. So we are going to ask some question to you. For the first question, in your opinion, what does affordable and clean energy means? The definition.
Thank you, Aini. Thank you, Maping. But before I explain or share my thoughts about affordable and clean energy, I just want to add to the introduction of myself, because usually tak kenal maka tak sayang, ya. So, in addition to my role as a CEO of IDH, Sustainable Growth Initiative in Indonesia, I've also become the country representative or CEO of IDH in Malaysia since 2018. And just recently, the IDH Global also has appointed me as their global envoy for nature-based solutions. So that's why the discussion now is timely, because this is quite relevant to SDG or Sustainable Development Goals. Yes. So in my view, affordable energy, Aini and Mapping, does not mean that the energy has to be cheap, or has no price. It means that it has to be able to be accessed or afforded by all people or population. So cheap energy, on the other hand, comes with a price. This is quite important. So, for instance, if you use coal or other fossil fuel as our sources for energy, these have consequences, such as dirty pollution, exhausted, coming from power generation, our modes of transportation, cars, motorcycle, and what have you. This has created air pollutions. So also, if you take into account power generations, fossil fuels used for power generation usually also tend to lead to an increase of greenhouse gas emissions, and this has a significant source of climate change, only for Malaysia, Indonesia, but the entire world. So the cheap energy that we usually consume right now happens because the externality is, the environment and social impact are not yet fully integrated into the price. Happens because of that. So it has now been perceived as cheap. So in my view, affordable and clean energy is important because we need to make sure that people can have access to energy. That's the first one. You, myself, rural people, usually they have difficulty to get access to the central power and what have you. So we need to ensure that they can get access to energy, electricity, and many other sources of energy. But they need also to be able to have access to clean energy. Because it is not necessarily good to only have an access of cheap energy, but not clean. As a result, yes, you can get access to energy, but you then have to breathe the pollutants coming from coal power generation, from your car's exhaust, and many of them. So I think that's quite important to take into account. More importantly, I think, especially for countries like in Malaysia, in Indonesia, and many other Southeast Asia, we are having abundance of sources of cleaner and renewable energy. This includes solar power, micro hydro, biomass, and many others. I'll give you some stats. Globally, for instance, 10% or more, or 1 out of 10 people, still lacks of electricity. Thankfully, in Malaysia, it's almost 100% people get electricity. In Indonesia, it's around 98%. But what we need to now ensure is not only getting access to electricity or energy, but also getting access that is quite dependable. So there's no, not only there's no blackout, but there's no also brownout, like intermittent current and what have you. Nevertheless, the more important thing is that 60% or more of this kind of energy is still unclean. So coal, fossil fuels, and many others are still the sources of energy. So that's why countries in ASEAN still have issues with regard to air pollution, with regard to climate change. And so I think we need to focus on that. That's why affordable and clean energy is important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tian. So it means that like understanding about the relationship between the way people function and how they participate in society and making sure that everybody has the same opportunities to participate in every aspect of life to the best of their abilities and desire, right? So yeah, generally it means like we have to get everything that valid for the affordable and clean energy. So we go to the second question. How important you think is clean energy for everyone to get?
So in my view, clean energy is so important because it will help revert climate change and reduce the environmental impacts. Locally, for instance, air pollutions will be reduced if you use cleaner energy. If you use, let's say, water as the source of energy or solar panel, because there won't be any byproducts like if you use coal. Can you imagine if we mostly power our economic activities using fossil fuels? The carbon dioxide, the carbon monoxide, the methane, and many others you have to breathe in, but also you release that to the atmosphere, creating that kind of greenhouse gases, global warming, and then climate change. In 2016, if I'm not mistaken, in Malaysia alone, the country ranks number 155 when it comes to PM 2.5 level. What is PM 2.5 level? This is like particles smaller than 2.5 microns in diameter, and known in shorthand as PM25. This is quite fine enough, this is quite small to lodge deep into our human lung and blood tissues. So if we are breathing in, they place exposed population at risk of heart, lung diseases, and also can lead to cancer. So that's why it is quite urgent for countries like Malaysia and Indonesia. I mean, Malaysia is number 155 in 2016. Maybe we need to check what is the rank now in 2020 or 2021. And Indonesia is also quite low in that ranking, meaning that we still are having significant issues related to air pollutions. And if you look at Malaysia and Indonesia and many other countries in the world, especially in Asia, the use of cars, and mostly the use of car, of course, using petrol, be it diesel or gasoline, and these are fossil fuel. Malaysia is the third highest in the world. It's around 93%, and then 54% of the households have more than one car. I think in Jakarta also, I saw Pak Nur Hidayat, so I think you can confirm as well. This is quite strange. I mean, our dependency on cars, having this kind of relations to also creating uncleaner environment because of the use of this kind of unclean energy. So it is quite crucial to push for cleaner energy. And in addition to that, if we also depend so much the power generations on coal, like in Indonesia, for instance, in 2018 in Indonesia, coal accounted for 60% of Indonesia energy mix. So that's why, pollutions in a big city like Jakarta have been created because of both cars or both transportation, but also because of power generation. So it is quite important to have clean and cleaner energy for everyone, especially for people with disabilities. Thank you.
Yes, I think also, thank you before for Mr. Fitrian. I think also everyone has the right to enjoy the standard of living required to maintain the health and welfare of themselves and their family, including food, clothing, housing, or also medical care, especially for the disability people. And as what you said about in Jakarta area, for example, a lot of pollution everywhere because of the traffic. And I think it's really important for people to taking care and get fairly about the clean energy. So after that, for the third question, from your experience, what are the main obstacles in producing and distributing clean energies to the community?
So I think at least there are two things that we need to see as the main challenges, but this could also be seen as opportunities. The first one is policy. So policy of the governments in ASEAN countries, for instance, they still perceive that fossil fuels are the cheapest mean to power our economic activities. The second one is, I believe, is the price. The price of renewable energy is still quite high. Of course, solar panel has been reduced in terms of the price, but other than that, it's still high. For instance, Indonesia has geothermal, 27 gigawatt, but only 30% that has been utilized. This is one of the reasons that, the reason is, in my view, because of the price. Even to explore whether we can find sources of energy from geothermal, you need to have $200 million for exploration. So it's quite huge and it's quite challenging. So the costs or the price needs to be reduced. And the price for fossil fuel and non-renewable energy is still low or perceived to be low because they haven't internalized the externality, the environment and social impact. So they haven't internalized, for instance, costs for hospital if we have respiratory disease, costs to do or install air conditions, air purifier and whatnot. So I think we need to change this kind of system or work together with the government and private sector to change this kind of system. In my view, Aini and renewable energy needs to be supported both by the government and the private sector. And we as consumers need to also say that we need that. It's not necessarily because of this is, fancy or good enough, but we need the clean air, we need the better environment, and also we need the electricity. For instance, that's why in the US, they have already invented electric cars, and I think they're coming in also to Indonesia, Malaysia, and others. So I bet you guys or you ladies, you want to have Tesla soon, or other means of electric cars in your house, or you want to have speed trains, these public or mass rapid transport system powered by solar panel, hydro, or whatever, because this is not only cool, but this is needed. And I think when it comes to clean, I just want to quote, especially in Islam, especially in the Quran, Allah's love a condition with cleanliness and purity, because the holy book, the Quran al-Karim says, in it, the mosques are men who love to clean and to purify themselves. And Allah loves those who makes themselves clean and pure. I think that's Quran number 9, ayah 108. So it's a good combination if we can get clean energy, because this can boost good electricity and good energy, but also with better environment, as well as boosting also our morale and spirit, because this is also what Islam requires. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. And that is very true. I think Mr. Fitrian has been explaining about everything, that if there are some main things, the problems to get the clean energy. And it is very true about in Islam that says if clean energy, it's really important also in our daily life to get, because it's a half of our iman as well. So for the next question, how is your company reaching out to persons with disabilities?
So we are quite lucky. We and our partners have what we call inclusion as part of our programs. This includes like gender inclusions, inclusion for vulnerable and marginal people, people that we need to support, especially in rural areas, low level of income, through our sustainable supply chains and sourcing area. But also we want to support people with disability and other challenges. Partners on the ground and also partners at global level, the like of Unilever, Mars, Mondelez, and many others, they have this kind of programs or pages or policies, because more than 1 billion people, that's 15% of the world populations, live with disability. Of this number, I think around 300-something million people are working age, and so I think it will be great to have more and more companies, organizations, not only to support but also to accommodate them as part of the working force or labor force. And I think people with disability, they also can contribute to many different things. People tend to have one particular factor when it comes to ability, but another factor that they can excel. So it should be not. People should not be judged because of their disability. Thank you.
Yes, we agree for what your explanation, and it's a very great. It's very great plan to reaching out the disability people, because of course they cannot left out. Yes, and for despite this situation, people with disabilities have often been left out of discussion about the energy poverty. But the Universal Energy Access Agenda has focused on the inclusion of vulnerable individuals, such as women, children, and the elderly, like what you said before. But relatively little focus has been placed on those with disabilities. So how about the Malaysian government policies related to this? If you know about this, maybe you can explain a little bit.
So, if I'm not mistaken, just according to the statistic of coming from the Malaysian government in 2017, around 400,000 persons were recorded to have or to be people with disability, and this is quite a challenge for a country like Malaysia, Indonesia, and many others also to accommodate and also to support, because the disability spectrum is also quite diverse. I think 34% having learning disability, 8.9 or 9% having visually impaired category. So in my view, the first and foremost is the policy of the government. And I think they have, in Malaysia, they have a good starting point, that the policy does not ostracize persons with disability. So I think this is a good starting point. Instead, they provide services for them. And what we want to see more and more happening, I think we need to work with the government to convince them that the most vulnerable, and especially person with disability, will be much worse if clean or cleaner energy is not promoted or developed. One of the reasons, like I mentioned earlier, that there are many studies that find correlations between air pollution and different types of sickness or an increased level of disease that trigger much difficulties for a person with disability. Can you imagine if they have to walk with wheelchair, and then you breathe dirty air? It's quite challenging. I mean, even for I wouldn't say normal people, but people like us without disability, it's already difficult. So I would say that I'm truly glad that you guys at the International Islamic University of Malaysia talk about this, because not many universities talk about this, and I would even encourage that you guys can be the hub or positive advocate for this, and can engage the government in Malaysia, talk about this, opening up the dialogue, and also indicating to the government of Malaysia that PwD, person with disability, need this and that, especially in the context of not only clean energy but also access to those that are in need. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Firian, for the supporting, and it's really good for us, because it will help our friends, especially International Islamic University of Malaysia students, to be more pay attention to people that needs more support, especially in this situation for the clean energy things. Yes. So for the next questions, the focus on persons with disabilities has been increasing within the Sustainable Development Agenda, and addressing the needs of the community with disabilities is an integral part of the United Nations of SDGs. While the SDG7, Affordable and Clean Energy, does not explicitly mention people with disabilities, so it does refer to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all, universal. So what is the impact or the key priority areas regarding energy that affects persons with disabilities? Maybe the main key only.
Yeah. So, if you look at the affordable and clean energy, usually if we can promote this and can expedite this can also lead to more modern infrastructure. And more modern infrastructure will provide better equipment for persons with disabilities. For instance, if you have good lighting system with solar panel, on the sideways or pedestrian or pathways, you tend to also then provide, access to persons with disabilities because, for wheelchair persons, for people that have difficulties, they can then, be helped with that kind of lightings, internet connections, for instance, with cleaner energy, it can then be introduced more in rural areas. And many persons with disability live in rural areas as well. They can enjoy more and more access to knowledge, more and more access to good technology that urban people have already enjoyed. So cleaner energy in many ways can then boost more and more modern infrastructure with better environment and social impacts. Cleaner energy, for instance, can also lead to cleaner water. Why? Because water and sanitation, especially in rural area or in the shanty town or in ghettos, can be then developed further with this kind of access to technology that can be used to process the dirty water to cleaner water. And this needs energy. And cleaner energy, especially energy from water, solar, and others can be so useful. So in many ways, cleaner energy would support and provide better environment and also better living for a person with disability.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fitri. Let's move on to the next question. In your opinion, how should government solve the lack of access to clean energy by persons with disabilities?
So these are two ways. Yeah, we shouldn't only ask the government, but also we need to help the government. So I believe dialogue is key with government and representatives of persons with disability. The university can facilitate that kind of dialogues because it will be seen as neutral conveners or neutral facilitators. Also, in my view, you guys like in the university can also help the government to identify some sort of low-hanging fruits when it comes to investment in infrastructure, investment in cleaner energy. Having or trying to boost cleaner energy usually requires huge amount of investment. So we need to see also some sort of priority and some sort of opportunity for that kind of investment. And if we have already been able to indicate and identify that, we hope that the facilities or the cleaner energy that or source of energy that are being developed by the government then can be much more affordable, much more useful, and also can be accessed easier by a person with disability. So the key is dialogue. The key is identifications, knowledge, and plan. So it will be challenging if we can't do that. Opening up the door with kind of dialogues. Thank you.
Yeah, the government should have more organizations that take care of the disabled, help them solve their problems in all aspects, including clean energy, provide them with convenience, and find more volunteers. For example, it is best to teach them easy, clear energy use. Next question is, how could we make persons with disability afford clear energy?
So individually, it's quite challenging. So I believe cluster or groups of persons with disabilities can do more. So perhaps first They can be helped, or they can identify options to cluster, to group themselves, and to change also the sources of the energy with clean and renewable energy. For instance, if they want to cook, they can find option from biogas. If they want to have lightings, they can also identify option from solar panel. And with this kind of grouping, they can improve the level of bargaining positions and talk to the government. So they can have some sort of support, blended finance, or some sort of grant mechanism, but also with loan or different type of support. They can also talk to progressive companies, Aini and Mapping, to have partnership with those companies. So the companies can also co-finance through the CSR or through other means, or provide whatever support. So those persons with disabilities, with the groups, can be having that kind of access to cleaner energy.
Yeah, yes, this is one of the tasks of the Global Sustainable Development Goals. Persons with disabilities are one of the organizations for the disabled. They have two responsibility to provide clear energy for the disabled, right? So next question, how could person with disabilities play a bigger role in the effort to implement clear energy? And what steps should be taken in accordance with your concept?
So it's like I've mentioned earlier in answering the previous questions, maybe just to add, if they have groups of persons with disability, and these kind of groups can lobby the government and also can push for dialogues with the government and the private sector, especially the infrastructure providers. I think they can, the government and the private sector can be made more aware, and as a result, they can increase the facilities to accommodate persons with disability. But also by using cleaner energy. So let's say the public areas are having much more access to person with disability. The lightings can be then added with the solar panel and many more. I think they need to talk, they need to sit together with the government and the infrastructure providers or developers.
Yeah, yes, as you just mentioned, clear water, subsistence, housing issues, and those all can improve them life. And before you mentioned, they cannot use the car, and some else can decide the not clear energy for our life, right? All right, next question. Do you think which country has been good in its effort to provide clear energy moment and include person with disabilities?
So I've traveled to, I think, around 50 countries across the globe, and what I've seen so far, and also I read the statistic, many developed countries have already done quite well when it comes to clean energy, but also including for person with disability. But more importantly, if you want to take into particular focus, I think countries like in Scandinavia. I've been to Denmark once before the pandemic, of course. I've seen that, for instance, they have installed so many wind powers, and then in their public system, they also provided with that kind of energy sources. They've provided new infrastructure for a person with disability. That kind of track for wheelchairs, and then the elevators also for person with disability. And somehow, this is one of my surprise when I traveled to those countries. One of my friends got accident, like I think 4 or 5 years ago, and as a result, he lost his legs. But then he picked me up at the airport. I just didn't realize that the way that the car was designed could accommodate him even without legs. So that kind of design with the result of electric cars and different type of cutting edge type of design has provided good facility, good support for both person with a disability as well as a normal person because of having cleaner energy, having reduction of price of cleaner energy. So it's a good life, to be honest. Why can't we do it here? I mean, we are also smart. Why not?
Thank you, Mr. Fitri. As you are just answered, many development countries are doing well in promoting clear energy. Maybe they spend a lot of human resources and money on clear energies to make the good countries. Alright, Mr. Fitri, I think it will be our last question, but after this we will give chance to audience to ask some questions. Alright? Okay. Last question. What about Indonesia? And what do you think about the government's effect in the last 10 years to promote clear energies? How about in fact to encourage person with disabilities use clear energy?
So if I can be honest, it is starting. It is okay, but far away from sufficient. So Indonesia still relies heavily on coal for power generation, for electricity. So that's not enough. That's why air pollution is still quite heavy. I think more and more coal generations or power generations connected to water, hydro, also connected to geothermal are needed. And because this is quite an irony to take into account that Indonesia has abundant resources of clean energy, namely hydro, water, biomass, biogas. We got so many vegetables or plants can be used for biomass. And of course, geothermal, like I mentioned. Indonesia has ring of fires, plenty of geothermal sources can be used, but it's not yet utilized optimally. I would say there are small steps to accommodate also a person with disability, especially in public areas. But this is still even far away, not yet sufficient. If you look at, for instance, if you walk around in Jakarta, you still you are already there. Not yet there, but you can see, if you are a person with impaired visibility, there's a line for that person with disability. But sometimes the line cut off by walls or by trees or something like that. So it's still, in terms of design, it's still far away. So I think we need to push both cleaner energy and also facility for a person with disability. It needs to be accelerated. Thank you.
All right. You just mentioned Indonesia is very relaxed in cooking and they need to improve in this area. Thank you for this more direct and steps. Okay, now I think it's time to answer question from our audience.
If there is any question from audiences, everyone can ask.
Yeah, ask Mr. Fitri.
Yes, Mr. Fitrian. I would ask. I a little bit pessimistic this clean energy efforts because we have been working for decades, but the results are not very encouraging. So, let alone for the disabilities, for the general public, is very difficult. It's better for us try to reduce pollution instead of working on and treating clean energies. So we have to choose perhaps a new strategy for us to save the earth.
Yeah, I think you're right, Pak Nur Hidayat. Sometimes people, general public, and as well as the government, if it's not urgent or perceived to be not urgent, the response is not going to be quick. Yeah, it's not going to be speedy. So it would be good to create that kind of urgency. And again, I agree with you. The first urgency is to address air pollution. The second urgency, and it's quite similar, is to address traffic jam, macet, because it has created economic loss to cities like Jakarta and others. So I think if we can push more and more public transportations for big city like Jakarta, or the change of cars in Jakarta to be much more efficient, it will be easing the challenge of a big city like Jakarta and reducing the environmental impacts, including air pollutions. But while we are doing that, then we can step wisely or gradually advocate that rather than using the power or the generations coming from coal, why can't they change into cogeneration, for instance, power mixed with biomass. In Manado, they have done it. In other areas, they also starting to do it. And I think also the financial institutions for students, they also need to know now. So many banks have said, especially international and regional banks, they don't want to invest anymore in fossil fuel. So this is also a good entry point. National banks are not yet there, but the national bank also usually got loans from international banks. So I think gradually, if not speedily, the investment in fossil fuel will disappear soon enough. So we need to utilize this, and then the investment for cleaner energy or or renewable resources would be having more and more momentum. So yeah, it's a stepwise approach. Thank you, Pani.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. I think it's a very clear explanation from Mr. Fitrian, but we have another question from Saif Adel. So, what are the current regulations around the world for affordable energy technologies?
Thank you, Mr. Saif Adel. I think what I can say, it differs depending which country we are looking at. In countries, in some northern or developed countries, they have introduced carbon tax or tax on pollutions. That's why it has also created an increase in terms of price coming from fossil fuel and coal. So in many ways, it has like leveling up or leveling off with the price of renewable energy, so renewable energy can compete. In Germany, for instance, they have a feed-in tariff system, meaning that if the renewable energy is still young, they will be supported or subsidized by the government. But if they are mature enough, they will they will get into the market price. So I think we need also to see whether this can be replicated in different countries, including countries in ASEAN. Other than that, I think there are also some sort of policies that have created, let's say, support or incentive for investment coming in for renewable energy. For instance, tax deductions or support for different facilities and whatnot. So in China, for instance, they have plenty of support or incentive for solar panel research and development. That's why the price of solar panel now is going down because of that. So China, it has been the leader of this kind of solar panel. Other than that, I think we can see also in India, they're growing as well, and many others. In Brazil, they have already changed quite a lot or significantly petrol from fossil fuel to bioethanol. I don't have the figure right now, whether this is like 50% or more. Indonesia is now currently also doing something for biodiesel. But there are certain impacts that we also need to understand. I mean, because they have to plant so many different crops that would produce that kind of ethanol or diesel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yes, Mr. Saif said, I understand and thank you for the true answer. And do you think that in Indonesia, is it good enough for the government policies to pay attention for this situation, Mr.?
So I think not only in Indonesia, countries in ASEAN, they're still a bit far away from really pushing for renewable energy or cleaner energy. So we need to help the governments in these countries to realize the urgency. So the urgency is not because of this is fancy again, but it is a requirement for these countries to be, getting to the top level income, being much more productive, and also getting access to getting the energy to be able to be accessed for the rural people and many vulnerable people. In a way, also, I can see now the trend is changing bit by bit, but it's not speedy enough. I think only Singapore, of course, is a small country. They have introduced climate change policy or carbon policy just recently that would incentivize people to invest in renewable energy or cleaner energy. So I think we need also to see whether Indonesian government and different governments in these ASEAN countries can do the same. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, Mr. Fitrian, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any question from audiences?
Yeah. Anyone else have?
Yeah, some quite a little times right now.
Yeah. Anyone else have question? Want to ask Mr. Fitri?
Yes, please.
Yeah, yes, please. Anyone else?
I think it's enough because
I will ask another question about this because I think if we given money, everything's go right. So the keys are money and technology. Are you agree with that? Because the two things that would menggerakkan dunia.
I think the first one is mindset. The first one is mindset, and the second one is mindset, and the second one is willingness. So if the mindset is not there, even if with money, you will not be able to change. Let's say us, for instance, if our mindset during this Ramadan is to just, if we get the money, to do buka puasa or iftar and buy whatever we want. If we got the money, we will buy whatever we want. But if our mindset is that, okay, if we receive money, we will then distribute that money. Of course, partly we will eat. We will buy food for our iftar, for instance. But a big amount, a big chunk, we will use it to contribute to fakir and miskin, anak yatim and others. And we will do that because we have the mindset, and of course the willingness. Even with the mindset, which is niyat, or itikad, then you will not do anything. But with the willingness, you will do more. So then, of course, with mindset and willingness, then you need money, technology, and the systemic change. The system is also important.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fitria.
Thank you, Pak.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, thank you, Mr. I think we will give just one more question because I think we still have a little bit time. Yes.
Okay.
If there is any question again.
If not, I may want to, raise a question to the two moderators, perhaps, or the students of the International Islamic University of Malaysia. What would you do? Having heard the opportunity, the challenge of cleaner energy, but also, challenge for person with disability. What would you do? The university and the students. Do you have any idea?
I think, for my opinion, I really think that, of course, it's really important to be universal in this situation. For the challenges, as what you said before, I agree that maybe a lot of people not really think about the disabilities people, if actually they really need help from us, especially in this case, to get just simple thing like in their daily life, to get the enough energy in their house. Also, for example, maybe the medical things in the hospital. Yeah. What else? Maybe also the transportation. It's really important, especially nowadays in this corona situation. So what I will do, maybe for this example, for this right now our webinar, it can be one of the thing that to help people to know about the situation, because our webinar also later we will share to Facebook and everywhere. So maybe some people maybe will read and will see about this case, and I think it's also good enough to make people that realize if to get clean energy fairly and universal, and to be more paying attention to the disability people.
Yeah.
And I think we got one more question also, Mister.
Yeah.
From someone. Yes.
Here is the question.
So
Yes. Okay. Here is the question from Nur Aini. Yeah. And I want to ask, do you happen to know how about in Malaysia government police clear energy issues?
Yeah, I've read, and I think in Malaysia it's quite similar to Indonesia. I think Malaysia has a target to improve the energy mix, trying to increase the contributions of renewable energy mix up to 20% by 2025, which is like 5 or even less than 5 years from now, and relatively quite challenging. But certain renewable energy policies or clean energy policy have been introduced. If you remember, in 2010, National Renewable Energy Policy or National RE Policy was introduced and approved by the cabinet. And then you got also fiscal incentives, especially for solar energy in Malaysia in 2014 and further in 2020. The announcement of the budget, the government announced the extensions of green technology tax incentive until 2023. So a number of good, let's say, policies and fiscal and economic incentives have been introduced. Now it's about execution, but also accelerations of these kind of policies, so this can be realized soon enough. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fitri. Anyone else have another question? Thank you for the answer.
Thank you.
Sorry, my internet connection just now disrupted because it's raining here. So thank you so much, Mr. for the answer. I think we can go to the conclusion session with mapping.
All right. Firstly, thank you, Mr. Fitri. That is awesome. Thanks to our guest, Mr. Fitri, for his wonderful sharing. Let us understand how important clear energy in our life. With the rapid development of the world, the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals is so important for our country, as well as calling on people to care for the disabled. In the Sustainable Development Agenda, attention to the disabled has been increasing, and addressing to the need of the disabled community is an indispensable part of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Although the goals does not explicitly mention persons with disabilities, It does mention affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy. So persons with disabilities should also have equal rights. Thank you.
Right. Thank you for mapping the conclusion, and thank you for everyone for your attention and participation in our program. We really appreciate it so much. I hope that everyone have a good night, and I think it's time to say goodbye. Me and mapping also our honorable guest. We will say good night.
Good night.
Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you. Terima
Thank you,
kasih.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
To join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mapping.